The morning everything changed, I was standing in the doorway of my dad's home office on Clearwater Drive in Sugar Land, Texas, holding a beige manila folder with hands that wouldn't quite stay still. It was a Tuesday, 11:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd screenshot it on my phone the second I realized what I was looking at. Some instinct I didn't understand yet telling me, document this. The folder was thin, unlabeled, sitting underneath a stack of old utility bills and a 2019 tax return, wedged between the wall and the bottom drawer of my dad's filing cabinet like it had been pushed there and forgotten. Or hidden and trusted. Inside was a bank statement from a credit union called Lone Star Community Financial, an institution I had never heard of, never opened an account with, never signed anything for. The account holder name printed in the top left corner was mine, Layla Mercer. Name. The statement showed 3 years of activity. Deposits arriving in structured intervals. Transfers out. Maintenance fees. A withdrawal history that told a quiet, methodical story. The closing balance on the most recent statement. $86,240. I sat down right there on the carpet, back against the cold metal cabinet, papers across my lap, and I did not move for a long time. Because in that moment, the passport didn't feel lost anymore. It felt placed. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Not unloved. Not neglected in the obvious ways people talk about. Just managed. Like every major decision made around you was engineered for someone else's comfort. And you were expected to be grateful for the roof over your head and the sacrifices they kept reminding you about. I had felt that way for years before I found that folder. But feeling something and knowing something are two completely different weights. What I found that Tuesday morning was not just proof that my parents had hidden my passport. It was proof that they had used money my grandfather left me, money I never knew existed, to keep me financially dependent, emotionally grounded, and physically stuck. For 8 months I missed job offers, drained my own savings, and felt myself quietly going crazy. And the entire time, $86,000 sat in an account with my name on it. That was the moment everything shifted. And I want to tell you this whole story from the beginning because if you have ever been controlled by someone who called it love, I think you will understand every single word. My name is Layla. I'm 27 now. At the time this story begins, I had just turned 24, and I was living in my parents' 4-bedroom house in Sugar Land, Texas, a suburb southwest of Houston, the kind of neighborhood with good school ratings and HOA newsletters and houses that look, from the outside, like everything inside them is fine. I had graduated 7 months earlier from the University of Houston. Go Cougs. With a bachelor's degree in business analytics. 3.79 GPA. 2 semesters on the dean's list. I had spent the last year of my degree applying deliberately to positions outside Texas, because the firms doing the most advanced work in supply chain analytics were concentrated in specific cities. London, Chicago, Atlanta. And I had always known I would need to go where the work was. A consulting firm based in Chicago's West Loop reached out in January of that year. Junior Analyst Supply Chain Division. $67,500 base salary plus benefits. Structured 24-month development track. Not a flashy offer. Real offer. The kind that becomes a career if you put your head down and deliver. I accepted on a Thursday afternoon, sitting in my childhood bedroom, next to the window I used to stare out of as a teenager, imagining what my adult life would feel like. I booked a one-way flight. Houston to Chicago O'Hare, departing in 3 weeks. $218 on Southwest, paid immediately. I had $9,600 in my personal savings account, built carefully over 2 years of part-time work and strict budgeting, and I had already researched furnished studio apartments near the Fulton Market District. I had a move-out plan. Timeline. A budget spreadsheet. I was ready. And then my parents sat me down at the kitchen table on a Monday evening and told me they had misplaced my passport. Let me tell you who I am inside this family because it matters. I am the middle child. My older brother Dylan is 30. He studied mechanical engineering, moved to Seattle at 22 for a graduate program, and essentially never came back full-time. He visits at Christmas and sometimes Thanksgiving. My parents accepted his departure the way families accept the departure of sons who are building something. With grief, yes, but also with a quiet understanding that this was the natural order. My younger sister, Kayla, is 21. She is the baby of the family in every sense of the word. Charming, pretty, and openly my mother's favorite in ways that were never hidden, just never acknowledged. Kayla has never been asked to drive anyone to an appointment. Kayla has never been handed a stack of invoices to organize. Kayla is simply loved, in the uncomplicated way that some children in some families are loved, without conditions attached. And then there's me. The reliable one. The responsible one. The one who stayed close to home for college, even though I'd been accepted to schools in 3 other states. The one who helped my dad with his small import-export business. Mostly paperwork, QuickBooks entries, vendor correspondence, 3 or 4 evenings a week because he asked and I said yes and then it became expected. The one who drove my mom to her twice-monthly cardiology follow-ups because she hated the freeway and I had a flexible schedule. I was embedded in the infrastructure of their daily lives in a way neither of my siblings had ever allowed themselves to be. And at some point I cannot tell you exactly when, that embeddedness stopped being called helpfulness. It started being called staying. What they didn't know was, I had been noticing things for a while. Small inconsistencies. Numbers that didn't add up. The particular way my father changed the subject whenever I brought up my grandfather's estate. I filed it all away, the way a person trained to find patterns in data does. Quietly, without making accusations she couldn't yet support. I'll get to that. The passport disappeared on a Monday evening in early March. I had shown it to my mother just 6 days before, sat at the kitchen table and physically placed it in front of her, open to the photo page, because I wanted her to see that everything was in order. Valid through 2029. Photo current. No issues. She had looked at it, nodded, slid it back across the table. 6 days later it was gone. I searched my room completely. Dresser drawers, the shelf in my closet, my file folder where I kept important documents, the inside pocket of every bag I owned. Then I searched the common areas of the house. Then I asked my mom, then my dad, then both of them together at dinner. My mother said she thought she might have seen it on the kitchen counter. My father said maybe it had gotten moved during the weekend cleaning. Neither of them met my eyes for more than a second while they spoke. The U.S. Passport Agency office nearest to us was the Houston Passport Agency on Rusk Street, about 28 miles from our house, roughly 45 minutes in normal traffic. A replacement passport costs $130 for the application plus the photo. It requires a scheduled appointment, which at the time had a 2 to 3 week lead time online. For 8 months, there was always a reason we couldn't go. My father's back was acting up. My mother needed the car for Kayla's orientation. The appointment portal was confusing. Can you just handle it, Layla? You know I don't understand these government websites. We would go next Saturday. Next month for sure. Let's wait until things settle down. 8 months of next time. I missed my Chicago start date. I emailed my hiring contact twice. The first time she was kind. She pushed my start by 5 weeks, noting it was a one-time accommodation. The second time after I missed that extended date too, she sent a brief, professional email informing me that the position had been filled internally and wishing me the best. I read that email sitting in my car in the driveway at 8:17 in the evening. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and stayed there for 4 minutes. Then I went inside, entered 3 vendor invoices in my dad's QuickBooks, made my mom a cup of chamomile tea, and went to bed. That is exactly what they had trained me to do. But the passport was not the beginning of this story. It was just the most recent chapter and the most visible one. The control had been building for years, in ways that felt in the moment like love or practicality or family obligation. That's what makes it so hard to name when you're inside it. It never announces itself. It accumulates. The first example. When I was 19, I was accepted into a 6-week summer research program at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. Fully funded. A $1,400 stipend. 6 weeks of real academic experience at a school I deeply respected, in a city I had never lived in. I was proud. I told my parents at dinner on a Friday night. My mother set down her fork. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, Who takes me to Dr. Harmon's on the 14th if you're in Illinois? That was the whole conversation. There was no argument. Just that sentence. Quiet, reasonable sounding, impossible to push back against without seeming selfish, sitting in the middle of the table between us. I didn't go to Northwestern. The second example. At 21, I applied to transfer to UT Austin. Not because I was unhappy at U of H, I had good professors, good friends, but because UT had a stronger analytics program, and I wanted what I had never had. The experience of living on campus, away from home, building something that was entirely mine. I submitted the application quietly, planning to tell my parents once I heard back. When I did tell them, 2 weeks later over a Sunday dinner, my father looked at me for a long moment across the table. Then he said, "Your Aunt Cheryl mentioned she saw you at the Galleria with some guy last week. I haven't said anything to your mother. But people notice things, Layla." I had been at the Galleria with a male classmate from my statistics course. We were working on a group project. We had been there for 2 hours in the food court with laptops open. I withdrew my UT Austin application 5 days later. Not because my father forbade it. Because the implication had done its job. In our family, the threat of social judgment, whisper networks between relatives, neighborhood perception, the quiet verdict of people whose opinion my parents valued more than my independence, was a lever. And my father knew exactly when to use it. The third example. The December before I found the folder, I had saved $9,600 over 2 years of part-time work, data entry, some freelance bookkeeping for a small local business, birthday money I hadn't spent. I was disciplined about it. Every week I transferred a fixed amount to a separate savings account. I had a spreadsheet. My mother mentioned that month that the kitchen needed new countertops. The laminate was peeling, she said. It was embarrassing when guests came over. She said it almost off-handedly, but she said it while looking directly at me. I offered $1,500 from my savings. I said it because I meant it. Because I was still, at 23, the kind of daughter who offered things like that without being asked. The countertops ended up costing $4,800 installed. Later, my mother mentioned to a relative on the phone, within my earshot, that I had contributed almost half. I didn't say anything. I adjusted my savings target and kept going. What I did not know, what I had no way of knowing, was that while I had been carefully, methodically saving $9,600 over 2 years of hard work and strict discipline, there was an account at Lone Star Community Financial with my name on it, holding $86,000 left to me by my grandfather, being quietly managed and slowly drained by the 2 people I had never once thought to distrust. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The moment that finally broke something permanent in me didn't happen in private. It happened on a Saturday afternoon in November, 6 months into the passport situation, at my Aunt Renee's house in Pearland, a family gathering for my cousin Brianna's baby shower. 40-something people. Folding tables with pink tablecloths. Cheese board nobody touched. The particular low hum of a room full of relatives who know each other's business and pretend they don't. I had been holding myself together for months by that point. Applying to remote positions that didn't require relocation. Watching my savings account drop. $9,600 down to $7,200 down to $5,800. As I covered my own phone bill, car insurance, and personal expenses while living in my parents' house, still waiting for the passport situation to resolve itself into something I could explain. I had told myself a story. That my parents were overprotective. That it was a cultural thing, a generational thing, a we'll-figure-it-out thing. I had kept the story reasonable because the alternative, what it would mean if it wasn't an accident, was too large to look at directly. That Saturday afternoon, I stopped being able to keep the story reasonable. It started with my Aunt Renee asking me, in front of a semicircle of relatives near the gift table, how the job search was going. It was a casual question. She meant nothing by it. But before I could answer, before I could even open my mouth, my mother spoke from across the room. "She's still figuring things out," my mother said. Pleasantly. Easily. The way you'd describe a teenager taking a gap year. "She's not in any rush. We like having her home." Few people smiled. Someone said, "That's sweet." I stood there holding a paper plate with a piece of cake on it and felt something very cold move through me. Because I was 24 years old. I had a 3.79 GPA. I had been offered a $67,500 analyst position in Chicago that I had lost because I could not get on a plane. And my mother had just described me to a room full of relatives as a girl who was still figuring things out and not in any rush. I set the cake down on the nearest table. I walked over to her. Kept my voice low. Mom, I had a job offer. In Chicago. I lost it because of the passport. She blinked at me. Then she smiled. The particular smile she used when she wanted to signal to the room that I was being dramatic. Layla. Not now. When? Said. Because it's been 6 months. When is a good time? My father appeared at my elbow from nowhere. The way he always did when he sensed a conversation going somewhere inconvenient. He put his hand on my shoulder, gently, firmly, and said, quietly enough that only I could hear, "You're embarrassing your mother. Not we'll talk about this at home. Not you're right, we need to handle this. Just you're embarrassing your mother." I looked at him. I looked at her. I looked at the room full of people pretending not to watch. And then my cousin Brianna, sweet, well-meaning, completely unaware, walked over and said brightly, "Layla, aren't you the one who was supposed to move to Chicago? What happened with that?" The room went just slightly quieter. My mother answered before I could. "It just didn't work out, honey. These things happen. These things happen." 8 months of manufactured excuses and a $67,500 career opportunity swallowed whole. And my mother's summary for the family record was, "These things happen." I excused myself. I went to the bathroom at the end of Aunt Renee's hallway, the one with the seashell soap dish and the framed live laugh love print, and I locked the door and stood at the sink with the water running, and I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I was not hysterical. I was not falling apart. I was done. Not done in the way that means storming out and making a scene. Done in the way that means something has been decided quietly and completely, and the decision is not going to be reversed. I washed my hands. I dried them on the guest towel. I walked back out to the baby shower and smiled and helped carry gifts to Brianna's car. But inside I had already started moving. That night I went home and for the first time I started actually looking. I want to be precise about what I was originally looking for because it matters. I was not snooping. I was not acting on suspicion exactly. Or at least I was not yet ready to name what I suspected. I was looking for a copy of my grandfather's death certificate. My grandfather, my dad's father, Richard Mercer, had passed away 3 years earlier from congestive heart failure at a VA hospital in San Antonio. He was 74. He had served 2 tours in Vietnam. He was quiet, methodical, and deeply private about money. The kind of man who kept paper records of everything and trusted banks the way most people trust weather forecasts, partially and with backup plans. He and I had been close in the specific way that skip-generation relationships sometimes are. He taught me to read a balance sheet when I was 16. He told me once, sitting on his back porch in San Antonio with a glass of sweet tea, that the most powerful thing a person could own was a paper trail. "Documents don't forget," he said. "People do." I had never been told the details of his estate. My father had handled everything. He was the executor, and whenever I had asked, even casually, the answer was always some version of "it's being sorted" or "there wasn't much there." I had accepted that. I had no reason not to. But after the baby shower, lying in bed at 1 a.m. with my mind running the same loop it had been running for months, I thought about something my grandfather had said to me the last Christmas before he died. He had pulled me aside after dinner, just the 2 of us in his kitchen, and said, "Layla, I'm making sure you're taken care of. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I had hugged him and said thank you and thought nothing more of it. That night after the baby shower, I thought about it for the first time as something other than a warm memory. The next morning, while my parents were both out, my mom at her Saturday Pilates class, my dad at his weekend golf game, I went into his office looking for the death certificate. I wanted to request a copy of the estate records from the county probate court. I just needed the case reference number. That was all I was looking for. What I found instead was the folder. Lone Star Community Financial. Count number ending in 4471. Account holder, Layla Mercer. The statement was dated 14 months earlier. I found 4 more underneath it, going back 3 years, starting within 60 days of my grandfather's death. The opening deposit was $94,000. I sat very still and read every line. The withdrawals were not random. They were structured, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, occasionally larger amounts in the $6,000 to $8,000 range. Some were labeled with memo notes: home repairs, medical, family expenses. The Lone Star Community Financial Account had been opened with a signature I did not recognize as mine on the account authorization form, a form I had never seen, never signed, and never been asked to sign. In 3 years, $94,000 had been reduced to $86,240. And the withdrawals had not stopped. I photographed every page with my phone. All 47 pages. Then I put the folder back exactly as I had found it. Same position, same paper stacked on top, and I walked out of that office and closed the door quietly behind me. I went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed. I opened my laptop. The first thing I searched was unauthorized use of beneficiary funds by estate executor Texas. The second thing I searched was estate attorney free consultation Houston. The third thing I did was call my brother Dylan in Seattle. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what I had found. He was silent for 11 seconds, I counted, and then he said, "Layla, don't touch anything else in that house. I'm calling a lawyer I know Monday morning." Said okay. Hung up. And then, for the first time in 8 months, I felt something that wasn't anxiety or exhaustion or quiet defeat. Felt clarity. Here is what I did not do. I did not confront my parents that night. I did not cry at the dinner table. I did not send the kind of text message you regret in a courtroom. I did not call my Aunt Renee or my cousin Brianna or anyone in that family circle who would have turned my private emergency into a group conversation before I was ready. I had spent 24 years being the daughter who managed her emotions for everyone else's comfort. For the next 30 days, I used that skill for myself. The Monday after I found the folder, Dylan called me at 8 a.m. with a contact, a probate and estate attorney named Patricia Owens, based in Houston's Midtown area, who had been recommended by a colleague of his in Seattle. I called her office at 9:03 a.m. and scheduled a consultation for Wednesday at 2 p.m. The fee was $250 for the first hour. I paid it from my personal account without hesitation. I walked into Patricia Owens' office on Wednesday with a printed copy of all 47 photographed pages, organized chronologically in a binder I had put together the night before. I had also printed the Texas Estates Code section on executor fiduciary duty. I had read it twice the night before, and I had a typed 1-page timeline of everything I could document. The date my grandfather died, the date the account was opened, the dates of my Chicago job offer and my missed departure, the 8 months of passport delays. Patricia looked at my binder for a long time without speaking. Then she looked up at me and said, "How long did it take you to put this together?" I said, "1 evening." She said, "Okay. Here's where we are." What she told me over the next 55 minutes changed the shape of everything. My grandfather had, in fact, left me a specific bequest in his will, $94,000, to be held in trust and distributed to me at age 25, or earlier at the executor's discretion if I demonstrated financial independence. My father, as executor, had opened the Lone Star account in my name using a power of attorney document that had been drafted during my grandfather's illness, a document I had signed at 21 without fully understanding its scope, in what had been described to me at the time as just paperwork in case anything happens. That POA had been used to open the account, and then used to access it. Patricia was careful with her words. She said that what I was describing could constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. It could constitute misappropriation of trust assets. She said the account signature on the original authorization would need to be examined. She said she needed to pull the probate court records for my grandfather's estate. She also said, "Do not move, access, or mention this account. Do not change your behavior at home in any way that would alert them. Come back to me in 10 days. He nodded. I wrote her a check for the consultation fee. I drove home and made dinner and helped my father find a vendor contact he'd misplaced in his email, and I did not say one word. 10 days later, Patricia had the probate records. My grandfather's will had been filed with the Bexar County Probate Court in San Antonio. The bequest was documented clearly, $94,000, designated specifically for me. The executor filing my father had submitted listed the asset as held pending distribution. 3 years later, it had never been formally distributed. Instead, it had been quietly redirected into an account that, while technically in my name, I had no knowledge of and no access to. Patricia used the phrase constructive fraud for the first time in our third meeting. She also told me in that same meeting that I had grounds to petition the probate court to remove my father as executor, compel a full accounting of the estate, and seek restitution for all unauthorized withdrawals, currently totaling $7,760 over 3 years. Then she told me the part that made me sit completely still. Because my father had used the POA to open the account rather than going through proper probate distribution channels, there was a legal argument that the entire $94,000 should be considered an improper handling, meaning the court could order the full original amount restored, not just the withdrawn portion. I asked her what the next step was. She said, "We file a motion with the probate court. We send a formal notice to your father as executor. And we request an emergency appointment for a replacement passport through the State Department's expedited processing program, which, given the circumstances, we can document as having been materially obstructed." I had my new passport in my hand 11 days later. I had not said a single word to my parents about any of it. The probate court filing landed on my father's desk, delivered by certified mail, on a Thursday morning while I was sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast, reading something on my phone, looking completely unbothered. I heard him open the envelope in the hallway. I heard the silence that followed. I poured myself another cup of coffee. My father called me into the living room that same Thursday afternoon. He was holding the certified mail envelope. His hands were not steady. My mother was sitting on the couch already, which told me he had gone to her first before coming to find me, and her eyes were red in the way that meant she had been crying or preparing to cry, or deciding which version of crying would be most effective. My father placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. He said, "What is this, Layla?" I looked at the envelope. I looked at him. I said very calmly, "It's a probate court filing. My attorney filed it on my behalf. It's a motion to compel a full accounting of Grandpa Richard's estate and a petition to review the executor's handling of my designated bequest." The room was very quiet. My mother said, "You got a lawyer? Against your own family?" I said, "I got a lawyer for myself. That's different." My father tried 3 more approaches in the next 20 minutes. The first was confusion. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We were keeping it safe for you." The second was anger, brief, controlled, the kind that collapses quickly when it meets something immovable. The third was my mother crying, genuinely this time, saying she had been scared of losing me, that the world was dangerous, that everything they had done had been out of love. I listened to all 3. I did not raise my voice once. I said, "I believe that you love me. I also believe that what you did was wrong. Both of those things are true at the same time. My attorney will be in contact." Then I went to my room and I started packing. Here is what the next 90 days looked like in concrete terms. The Bexar County Probate Court ordered a full accounting of my grandfather's estate within 45 days of our filing. My father, on the advice of his own attorney, a man he paid $3,200 to, chose not to contest the motion. The accounting revealed the full picture. $94,000 received. $7,760 withdrawn over 3 years for undocumented personal expenses. The remaining $86,240 still technically in the account. Patricia filed for full restitution of the $7,760 plus legal fees. The court ordered it. My father was formally removed as executor. A neutral third-party administrator was appointed by the court to oversee the final distribution of my grandfather's estate, which included not just my $94,000 bequest but 2 additional assets that had not been properly disclosed in the original probate filing. I will not go into the details of those, because that part of the story is still being resolved. What I will tell you is that the number got larger before it got settled. The $86,240 was formally distributed to me, into an account I opened myself at a bank I chose, with a debit card that arrived in the mail at a new address. Not my parents' address. My address. I had moved out on a Sunday morning in February, 11 weeks after I found that folder. I loaded my car, a 2019 Honda Civic with 54,000 miles on it, with 4 boxes and 2 suitcases. My mother stood in the driveway. She did not try to stop me. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her look. Hugged her. Meant it. I drove to a furnished studio apartment in Midtown Houston that I had signed a lease on 10 days earlier. $1,340 a month. 7th floor. A window that faced east, so the light came in every morning. I sat on the floor of that empty apartment, boxes around me, keys in my hand, and I cried for about 15 minutes. Not from sadness. From the particular physical relief of a weight you have been carrying for so long that you stopped noticing it was there, until the moment it's gone and your whole body exhales. 3 months later, I accepted a remote analyst position with a logistics firm based in Atlanta. $71,000 base. Full remote. I work from that east-facing window every morning. I never made it to Chicago, but I got somewhere better. Got out. People ask me sometimes if I've forgiven my parents. Honestly, I'm still working on that. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a single decision. It's more like a direction you keep choosing slowly over a long time. Some days I'm further along than others. What I know for sure, what I want you to hear if you take nothing else from this story, is this. The control only worked as long as I was financially dependent on them. The moment I had my own money, my own lawyer, my own lease, my own account, every lever they had ever held over me stopped working. Not because I became someone different, but because I finally had the resources to be who I had always been. My grandfather told me once that documents don't forget. He was right. And I think, in whatever way an 74-year-old veteran from San Antonio could reach forward through time, he made sure I would eventually find mine. If you have ever been underestimated, managed, or quietly diminished by the people who were supposed to love you most, I hope you remember that was never the truth about you. It was only ever the truth about their fear. If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. And if you've been carrying something like this, a family situation that doesn't have a clean name, I hope today is the day you start documenting. Like this video if it stayed with you. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And share it with someone who needs to hear that leaving is not betrayal. It's just finally choosing yourself. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is for people who survived something quiet and came out the other side knowing exactly who they are. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And if you've got your own, drop it in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people need to hear it.